How will you remember David Stern?
Wow, the NBA changed my life. Growing up, my biological father actually was the #1 pick in the 1967 NBA draft, Jimmy Walker. I never met him. And so basketball was always in my blood. So being born in 1973, I remember when the games were on tape delay because Magic Johnson, also a Michigan native, was my idol, playing against Larry Bird. So staying up late to watch those games and then trying to mimic the moves. And then the NBA had a terrible reputation amongst marketing, for promotions, amongst advertisers. There was a lot of drug use in the league. It was hard to get a stranglehold on what's going to take the league to the next level. Enter David Stern. The same year that Michael Jordan got drafted, Hakeem Olajuwon got drafted, Charles Barkley was also in that draft. You could buy an NBA team at that time for $5 million. D. Wood got that in his pocket right now. Okay? $5 million. Now the average team is $2 billion. So how he started to market the players, and this may make some people uncomfortable, but a predominantly black league trying to advertise to white fans and white sponsors, he had to show them that these players could be marketable, that you can build things around them. And I saw in that clip where they talked about the dress code. That's just a graduation from what I just said in the 80s. I was in the league then. It was a wink-wink thing. It was one of those things that David Stern knew he needed to keep his marketing, promoters, his advertisers happy because they felt like the league was getting a little too black. So he instituted a dress code. It ain't last. We ain't do it. We didn't do it. And so he knew how to keep all sides happy for the growth of the league, and now the players can now flourish.
I love that, Jalen, just because you are willing to go there, especially myself being a woman in sports, also a male-dominated industry. I was drafted to the Connecticut Sun in 2014. That was the year in which David Stern retired. And even though I came into the league when Adam Silver took over, all WNBA players have an immense gratefulness for David Stern because, and one of my greatest mentors and friends is Lisa Leslie. And Lisa Leslie, she always tells me stories about the '96 Olympics. I also heard about it in college because the head coach of that Olympic team was Tara Vanderveer, my Stanford head coach at Stanford University. And they would tell me about how amazing the '96 Olympics was. David Stern was the reason why the WNBA was formed. He saw and capitalized upon that momentum for women in sports. And then to this day, we are the only women's professional league that has never folded 23 years standing. That was all David Stern. So for me, as a player that's, I guess, newer in this generation, we all have an immense gratefulness for everything he has done, not just for people of color, but also women, advancing women in sports, period.
Yeah, I think I'm a football player, obviously, but also a strong union guy. I was president of the NFL Players Association. I worked at the NBA Players Association for a while. So given that history, I have many memories of David Stern and even have a lot of criticism of the things that he's done over his track record. But looking at the totality of his career and his life, it all makes more sense now today. I think that while you could argue with some of the decisions he made, and I remember the dress code is one that you brought up, and I remember being frustrated as a black player in a different league at the time, but being angry and frustrated. But like, you look at the big picture of it, it makes more sense. And I think the league is absolutely, and the sport and sports in general, frankly, are all better off for having had David Stern. I remember I was invited to speak when I was still playing in the NFL. I was invited to speak at the NBA Players Association meetings at the All-Star game in LA. And I just went there 30 minutes, talked to them because they were headed into a lockout, whatever. Then I was just roaming around the streets in LA, and I ran into David Stern. I'm a nobody. I'm like a random cornerback, no reason why anybody should know him. He stopped me, and we had like a 30-minute conversation. He invited me to some other stuff later on. And like just the memory and the intelligence and awareness, just to be aware of all that, and also the patience and compassion, because like, I'm in another league. There's no reason to believe that I'll ever have any influence on him. It wasn't him trying to gain anything. It was him seeing somebody that he recognized and trying to reach out and help me and give me advice and offer me advice. So that always resonated with me. It stuck with me. It made me, frankly, a little jealous being in my league. But David Stern has been fantastic for this league, and I think today is about celebrating that.
Yeah, I know. Like for me, again, I'm a football guy coming from the NFL and looking at the NBA. The thing that really stands out to me, looking back at David Stern's career in the NBA, is how he was able to market the players. coming from a football league where it's about the shield and the logos. What David Stern did for the players and making the players the focal point. What we see today. I mean, when we think about the NBA, you don't necessarily think about the teams. You think about the LeBrons and the Steph Currys and the James Hardens. David Stern is the reason that we're talking about that today, because he did that, back in the 80s. Again, when you talk about, Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles, all those guys, you talk about the Dream Team, making the guys a global brand, and fans all over the world bought into that and made the NBA the popular sport that it is today. And that all goes back to David Stern.
And a lot of that genius is he wanted the NBA players to be looked at as superheroes, like movie stars. So now when you're watching NBA games, we're paying attention to their fashion. The Houston Rockets now have a red carpet for James Harden and Russell Westbrook to actually walk to the games too. It was 23 teams when he took over. Now it's 30. The average salary for players was $250,000. The average NBA player now could get $10 million a year. They could walk down the street, you wouldn't even know who they are. Some of the greatness that he did also, All-Star Weekend. Now just think about what happened with All-Star Weekend. In the mid-'80s, Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, must-see TV, standing in front of the TV, to grow the game. That was to grow the game. So now a great player like LeBron James doesn't even have to be in the dunk contest. He don't even have to do it, because they already grew the game so exponentially that players get a chance to benefit, to the point where now is you don't necessarily have to wait to All-Star Weekend to see them play, because they're joining up to play with each other in the regular season.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.